Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
So if you are a parent, you want to be listening, you want to be watching, because we have somebody that has great advice for all types of parents with all different types of kids. And her name is Alicia Trautwein. She is the founder of themomkind.com. Alicia, how you doing today?
Great. How are you today?
Good. Great to have you on again. And we delve into all different topics. We'll tell everybody that you are an autism advocate and, of course, the director of the Momkind. But on your website, there's so many different resources that go from ADHD, of course, autism, to just about anything you might be dealing with your children. And we talked about anxiety last week. So this week, we're going to kind of center up on depression, but also the connection to anxiety as well, which unfortunately, nowadays, a lot of kids are dealing with for many different reasons. I mean, even as they come out of COVID, that brought on a lot of anxiety and may have fueled things, kick things up, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's a lot that every kid's going through at least something right now with this transition.
I'm glad you said that because it is so true. And if you're ignoring it or not aware, then you need to look closer. I mean, my daughter came home yesterday after seeing the principal, and I learned that she's having trouble in quite a few classes that I wasn't aware of. And I'm watching everything on Google Classroom and a couple of assignments.
Still didn't catch it, yeah.
Yeah, and as much as you try to watch it, these things are going to happen, and you just got to monitor it. So let's get into depression for kids and even adults too, if we want to go.
Well, it's one of those things where a lot of people don't think about it being something that they're going to have to worry about, or they think that even it's consistently long-term. It's not always long-term. Sometimes we have things called seasonal depression, where it's more of a short-term, something that can be managed through therapy and kind of working through. And then you have long-term depression that, it's lifelong and something that you don't always have the depression, but you always have that ability, the inkling to go through a depressive state. So you go through spells of depression as opposed to always consistent. So it can vary person to person. But when it comes to depression, I mean, especially with kids, sometimes you just don't think about it. You don't realize what's going on until it happens. I mean, we were really deep into our second oldest daughter, her symptoms of depression. We were really deep into it before I was like, I think she's depressed. And, because she was going through other stuff, but because it happens so slowly, you have things that, there's sudden stuff sometimes, but sometimes it just gets worse. Sleep's a big issue, with depression. You can either have too much sleep or too little, but it's not always overnight. It can be that, okay, well, she's sleeping about 30 minutes more a day. And now, a month later, it's like, hour more. And the next week, it's like 2 hours more, it builds on it until you realize, oh, she's constantly in her room. I haven't seen her in forever. And it's not the normal teenage, just hiding.
Oh, totally got what you're talking there. I mean, for my daughter, it's almost hard to pry her out of her room. This has never happened. I'm going to share. We watched a movie 2 nights in a row. I'm like, I'm a cool dad.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I tell my kids I'm awesome, but they laugh sometimes when I say that. But I get it, because teenager, I mean, when you get a chance to spend time with them, it's like your mind's blown. You're like, wait, you love me still?
I know. And I will admit, it wasn't like, a heartwarming Disney flick. We saw a Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Hey, that works. My husband used to watch The Walking Dead with our oldest.
Yeah.
That was their thing. Every week the new episode came on. I mean, this is going on since she was, would have been like 10 when it started. And I was like horrified. I'm like, why are you letting her watch this? And then, but she was just into it like he was. I'm like, well, it's quality time.
Yep. Bonding. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. Like, we might look at our kids and say, depression, well, how bad could it be? You don't have to worry about mortgage bills, relationships so much, and all the other stuff. You just got to go to school and have fun. But
we think that they don't have a lot, but in reality, they have more than most adults have. Because if you think about it, their school, they do 40 hours a week at school, not counting the bus rides.
Yep.
That time is expected to be learning, to be sitting a certain way, to behaving a certain way, taking in information, but at the same time, trying to, like, we would talk to coworkers, they have friends around them, trying to develop these friendships, relationships, hormones going crazy because
Yeah.
Let's face it, they're teenagers.
Yep.
That's a whole thing. And then after that, they come home and they're expected to do more of that same work. They have homework to do, but then they have family time. Some of them have sports or, clubs they go to after school. And there's only so many hours a day. So their entire day from, pretty much when they get up to going to bed is filled with responsibility. And we don't realize it because we think, oh, it's just school, you're a kid. Because you don't, like you said, you don't have to pay mortgage. There's not physical money, but their work is just as much, if not more, than what we're expected to do.
Right. And the bullying aspect and the media aspect. We don't have to so much deal with that, but they, especially teenage girls, it's almost like 24/7 on your phone, TikTok, Snapchat, and there's images and things flying back and forth. And you feel that you have to stand up to meet the expectations. You see a picture, you got to look like that. So that, drills in your brain. That's one more on the stack.
Well, yeah, and that's, the way we've talked about before, but that whole 24/7, when we were kids, if you had a bully, it stopped when you left the school. When you were not at school, you weren't dealing with your bully. Now you're dealing with it 24/7 because they can add the kids, like you said, Snapchat and all these things. The kids get constant access. They never have a break from that part of their life because it's always going all through. So it's also just as much ability for things to happen. When we've had issues in the past with bullying, even, going into depression, anxiety, I would ask the right questions even. But just because you ask the question doesn't mean that your child's always going to tell you. Because sometimes they think, I don't want mom to get involved in this. I can handle it. It's not too much. They don't want to tell you everything. And that's just being a kid. I mean, that's even if you have the best relationship, sometimes they don't tell you everything.
Yep.
And it builds up, or sometimes they don't always know. I mean, especially like, I have, my kids are all, I could say that one of my 3 daughters could see through, all the BS somebody would feed her, but the other 2, they would believe a lot of stuff and think that it was positive when it wasn't. Or they wouldn't see a relationship, even friendship wise, as what it, they would see as, oh, she's just like that. That's how she likes to do stuff. And not realizing that, that person's not letting them do anything. They don't get to make any choices. They don't, they're pressuring them into something they're not. And they just think they're being friends with them.
Totally.
And so, I mean, there's all these things that happen. These things these kids have to deal with. I mean, and then you add COVID on top of that. I mean, this, virtual learning, I mean, it isolated the kids. It was forced that they were nonstop related to the kids in school through Zoom. But at the exact same time, there was no one physically around them.
So when you sense that your child may be depressed and there's lots of different symptoms, where do you go from there? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, a big thing, I mean, you think about the symptoms, you're talking about, like the sleep, your behavior's off. Sometimes it's, they're very, it can be crying, but it can also be, they can be really angry and aggravated. You have like sleep issues, the whole body. Like, I mean, there's sometimes where like, your appetite's affected because how it is when you get stressed out, you don't want to eat, right? Or sometimes you get stressed out and you really want to eat. And there's this drastic change in their weight because of the food, because whether it's negative or positive, because they're not, they're using the food as a way to release the stress, or they're not eating because they're so stressed out.
Yep. And
you have things like that. And like, I mean, just that isolation and that sadness, the loss of pleasure and activities is the big one they always look for. It's like, do you have a hobby? Do you still find your hobbies interesting? Because a lot of times the kids will get, especially kids, but even adults, we lose interest. We just we're going through the emotions and we're not, and it gets to the point where you're just doing it because you have to do it, not because you're happy. And so you get to a situation with the kids, and the biggest thing to start out with is talking to them, obviously, not, asking open-ended questions. You and I've talked about that, we talked about that before, but those open-ended questions, don't give them a chance to say, oh, that my day was fine, or yes or no answers.
So
they have to give them a chance to.
It is so, I tell you, Alicia, it is so important. And even before I talk to my kids, I try to think of how I'm going to phrase the question. It's almost like kiss of death, waste of time to say, how was your day? Hey, I generally, and like any other parent, I want to know, how'd your day go? But you know what you're going to get. So
That's great, fine, that's good.
That's it.
That's all you're exactly. And I even catch myself. I'll still do it. My ninth grader, she'll walk in the door from school, and my instant response, and I know it's a lot because that's how our parents were and things like that. Oh, how was your day? I did it again. I had to think, I had to stop it. And then after she'll say fine. Every single time she'll say fine. And there was only one time where she actually said it was bad. And with her, when she has a bad day, so it's, it was one of those like clear things, but it wasn't, I have to think, okay, now I said, oh, that's great. What'd you eat for lunch? I'll just have to like throw a random question out there, because you have to give them a chance to start talking. Because once they start talking, that's when you have that opportunity to get deeper, to find if there's an issue, or find if it's a bullying issue, or if they're overworked at school, or maybe, responsibilities at home are too much to combine with school. That does happen. We don't think it's much, but when you think about, okay, it's a full day, we went to work, now we're coming home, and my boss said, do all this stuff when I'm at home, and now I got to take care of my kids. I got to clean the dishes, make the dinner, put stuff away, clean my room, do all these things. It might be too much for them. That might be something that they need to save for the weekend, or so, it's a balancing act that they have to find. But in order to talk to them, they're not going to ever say, oh, mom, it's the chores. They're not, but they just say, I just feel tired all the time. Okay, let's look at your schedule. Let's see what's going on, write it down, okay, this is your school day, okay, these days you had these activities, this is going on. Okay, is there days that you can take a break? Is there some day that we could skip this club? Maybe not drop the club altogether. Maybe we, need a plan that, okay, on, this next meeting, you miss it, so you can have a day of break. Little things like that to help them work through some of that. Obviously the bullying, that's a huge issue kids deal with right now. More so than, we dealt with it bad, but now it's just, it's, you've got cyberbullying. It's not just in person, you have cyberbullying to add to it. And
yeah,
it's a lot. And honestly, a lot of times unless it's something that has physically happened, or a threat that is indicating a crime, nothing's going to happen to a bully.
Right. Yep.
And I get from their perspective, and that's why, I have actually told my kids, you better never start a fight. However, if someone attacks you have a right to defend yourself. The goal isn't to, the goal is not to now become the offender after you defend it. The point is to defend yourself so you can get away, or somebody breaks up. But I had to teach them that, because sometimes the bully situation, it doesn't end when, you contact a teacher or something like that, because the teachers can only control so much.
Yep. Been through the same situation, and sometimes there's no resolve, and it's just like, kind of end it and move to, your corner, and that's it. But you got that. So what's going to happen? And then you got friends and people talking to other people. And that's a lot of times I've found that's where that's like the gasoline on the flame, when your friends, or just friends of friends, are on Snapchat and they're all talking about you. Did you see what they did?
Yeah, and that's where it gets bad. Yeah, on social media. And it's one of those things where it's a hard balance too, because when I fully admit, and she'll laugh if she ever actually listens to this, but our oldest, I fully admit we made mistakes when it came to trying to balance the situations with her when it came to the phone. Because there wasn't, she's 19 now. So when we were dealing with it, she was 10, 11, 12, 13, those middle school years. And there really wasn't somebody saying, hey, this is what you should do with phones. No one had lived through it. No one had lived through this whole social media and bullying coming through that. We were learning as we went. And so, I didn't want to give her a phone in the first place. I was like, no, she's too young. Mm-hmm. I wound up getting a phone anyway. And I get it was a contact thing. We want to be able to keep in contact with her, stuff like that. And so originally, phone, we said no social media. But then it becomes the issue where they get bullied because they don't have that. If they don't have the phone, we took away her phone sometimes, she'd get in trouble. And then it was a fear for her that, we hear the fear of missing out, but it was real with her. Like she didn't know who was talking about her and what was being said because she couldn't access it. And then if she, or she took her phone to school and she was blocked out of it, it was, haha, you can't get on. Like things like that. And it was a constant struggle to try to balance. And at the same time, it's like, you have to let them learn too. They have to learn how to manage it. So it's like, you don't want to take everything away, because at the same time, that's their access to their friends. Especially in the middle school ages, a lot of kids don't have necessarily a phone number. They have a phone that has Wi-Fi, that has apps. They have their apps to connect with each other. Mm-hmm. As they get older, they probably have a phone number. Once we know the kids are responsible with the phone, then the phone number comes. But a lot of times, parents have learned that. But schools have Wi-Fi, phone has Wi-Fi. There's not. So it gives them a chance to get in touch.
Yeah, and it started with an iPod.
Yeah.
So, some apps on there and, connected by Wi-Fi. So let's say we're at the situation where you really feel that your child is depressed. It's just, you see some signs. So what's step number one? You go to the doctor.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things where you call the doctor right away, because the reality is when you say your child is having these symptoms, your primary doctor is going to do their best to get them in as quickly as they can, because they know that there's an issue. And what they'll do in the appointment, they'll just kind of ask them the same question you've been asking. What's going on? You and I talked about this before. Write down symptoms ahead of time. This is what I've noticed of my child. I've noticed they're in their room all the time. I notice he's not eating. I notice that he's really cranky all the time. Write those things down, because they're not going to always remember, and you're not always remember everything. But then you have this information to give the doctor, then the doctor can dive deeper into that. And a lot of times, doctors don't want to have to prescribe medication unless it is needed.
Yep.
And so a lot of times what they can do, they'll immediately give you a referral to a therapist, according to what the level of how depressed they are. What kind of level are we at? A level where they could harm themselves? Okay, that's medication, that's possibly hospitalization. There's things, there's extreme, but if it's just, we're in the starting stages, okay, let's get you to a therapist, because I know a lot of us when we were kids, we thought counseling is not, we didn't really think much of it, or we didn't really, we're like, that's no big deal. It's not going to help. But now there are therapies. It's CBT, it's cognitive behavioral therapy, and it works on helping them change their own behaviors. And this is something that therapists do with adults as well, but learning to change the behaviors that are causing the issues. So it helps them work through things. And so therapists can do a lot. Really, it's one of the things I actually recommend it highly to go to a therapist, because especially if you've never gone, you don't know the coping skills. There are things that they might be able to teach your child that you didn't think about.
100%. And I would rather start there than start with medication.
Right.
Because once you open the medication door, not a bad one at all, but now it's trial and error. Did that one work? You got to give it time. Then we're on to another one. Now a different dosage. One thing I do want to mention that you mentioned before, Alicia, by the way, we're talking with Alicia Trautwein, who is with themomkind.com. Great website, a lot of resources. And the thing I wanted to bring out was, and it's almost like the elephant in the room, and it's so, I hate to say common now, but kids cutting themselves.
We struggled with that. That was a hard one for us. And she'll admit it. My oldest was that way, and it was terrifying.
Same. I totally do that. Yeah.
Because as a parent, I'm sitting there, you're thinking you're one wrong cut from dead if I don't find you in time. That's your thought as a parent.
Yep.
And I mean, she would take a butter knife. Like, we had butter knives that had little bits of serrated on there. She'd take a butter knife downstairs in your room, and she'd hide them in her bed, and I'd have to go find stuff, and I had to take every sharp object away. I'm like, what? No, why are you doing it? And we talked to the therapist and the doctor, and I thought they were going to hospitalize her, because I'm like, she's cutting herself. She's, and they're like, no, she's not trying to hurt herself. She's trying to find a way to release the pain. She's not trying to end her life. She's trying to get the pain out that she can't get out.
Yep.
And that was a lot to cope with. It was hard to understand that. I mean, it's just one of those things until it's something that I wish no one goes through. But I guess, until you go through, it's not to me fully understand, just like any other disorder thing going on.
Totally.
But yeah, it was her way to release the pain, because she was able to focus on that pain instead of what was going on inside her, because that was something she could control, not that. And so we had to, learn, help with her, redirecting. She kept a rubber band on her arm, so she snapped the rubber band instead. That's the therapist had recommended.
That's it.
And so she did
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Never thought, and it's accomplishing the same thing. But as a parent, your fear, especially when you first find something like that, I know what you're talking about. Then you're looking for utensils or sharp objects.
Well, and it's not as simple as people think it is either when it comes to cutting. Because I mean, when I first started, you hear cutting, you think the arm, right? And well, she had gone through a spell. Her depression got really bad. She had a lot of struggles. It wasn't her fault, but her depression got really bad to the point that she wrote in her journal, and she left her journal out where I could see it. It was it wasn't that kind of journal, like a notebook journal. And she had said something. She had said something, and I just kind of, something was wrong. So I went in the room, look around. I found it, and she admitted that she was at that point. She didn't want to hurt herself, but she was wishing that she was no longer here. And she was at that level. So I mean, and I dropped her off at youth group. So immediately after that, it was hospital. I wasn't, there was no questions. I went and grabbed her. I didn't even say anything. I was like, hey, come on. I made sure when she got the door, I locked the door, started driving down the highway so she couldn't get. And then I'm like, okay, we're going to the hospital. I read your journal. But what I found out in the process, she wasn't cutting her arms anymore, but she was cutting. She managed to cut on her sides, places I would never see, no matter what she was wearing. She was cutting her sides. When she was younger, and it was something that I didn't notice when she was younger, it always scared me, but I didn't know how, the doctors were like, oh, that's normal, but it wasn't normal, but she would skin pick when she was little. It started with skin picking. And she would pick until she had a scab, so that way she had a scab to peel off in a sense. And her whole little body was covered in it when she was little, and because she struggled with that anxiety. It was like, for her, it's long-term anxiety that overlaps there. It's like we talked about before, but that overlap, that anxiety is a symptom of depression. It can be a symptom of that, but then there's so much that overlaps. It's not 100% by any means, but it's about 2/3. And so when you have somebody with anxiety, high anxiety, they're more apt to be depressed. They're more apt to hit those higher lows because a lot of things like the restlessness, the excessive worrying, the agitation, that's stuff that all overlaps with, each one.
Yep.
And so, with her, it was crazy because I was, it was one of those things where I worried even she was a little skin picky, but it stopped, and then went to cutting and it stopped. So I thought she was good. And then we were talking through all these struggles. And then I find out, we've been talking, but obviously I wasn't getting the full answer because she wrote it out because she couldn't verbalize it.
And at what point did you try medication?
Oh yeah, that was the time. She had, at that point, she was actually on some medication, and we took her to the hospital. So the hospital kind of changed it around, and from there but then the immediate thing with the hospital, it wasn't about the medication. It was about providing a place where there was no distraction, so she didn't have the phone. There was set routine. You did stuff at that. That was one thing she told me. She did enjoy. She enjoyed the routine. The simple, this is what we're doing now. Now we're doing this. Now we're eating. Now we're doing this. It was a routine the entire day. And it gave her brain a break from everything.
Interesting, because she had structure, and that took away some of the stress and anxiety because she didn't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah. And so that was a big thing she told me. And then they go through therapy there. And so when she left there, she had some medicine because she had to be medicated at the time. Now she doesn't take anything, but she did that to get her through to be able to go to the therapies, the more extensive therapies, because there's more higher levels of therapy according to what you're going into, to be able to then develop those skills. And so when she's able to develop those skills, then the medicine was able to go away. Because she might be, once in the future, she may decide to go on anxiety medication again. She may not. But now she has those coping skills to where it doesn't get to that point.
It's amazing how all of these things are intertwined, and it's almost like a machine, like a car that has to be running perfectly. If one thing is out of sync, you're going to have a problem with your kid. Like if the medication isn't right, or like you just said, you might not even realize that you've stacked so much on, not you, but all of us stack so much stuff on our kids' plate that's causing a lot of the anxiety because they can't deal with all of it. And just structure, just having that. Yeah.
What do you think about it? I mean, they want a break. I mean, what's the first thing they do when they come home? They want to eat something and get on a video game, or they want to eat something and go downstairs in their room, right? That, and reality is they need that. They need that chance to just be a kid. I mean, they unfortunately, the way school works right now, they don't have a lot of time to be a kid during the school year.
No, my son doesn't even take a lunch because he's on to another class. And I think this semester he just took up lunch because he because
when you're in college and stuff, I mean, you want to get stuff out of the way. You're like, well, I got grants or whatever. I want to get as many classes done, and they're just like, let me slam through it. I'll just eat my snacks along the way, And there's a lot on them.
Praise is important, and my son just said the other day, "Hey, you know what? My grades are back up," and I'm aware of it because I'm watching it, and I always praise him. But even for him to say that, it's almost like he's asking for some approval. So I said, I know, and you're doing a great job. Just keep doing it. Because there was one class he was not doing that great in. Now we brought them all up, like amazingly brought them up. And the funniest thing is, I'll just share this. that's the way my mind works. Things pop in. Same time last year, the same exact thing happened. I don't know why that is, but it was the springtime. He was doing kind of crappy. And then beep, things came up right around this time. It was like April, around April of last year. But praise is so important.
Yeah, they go through, because I mean, you get winter break messes things up. They've got, finals, they've got, testing. There's so much on their plate.
What you just said before, seasonal depression. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, stuff going on. I mean, I struggle more in the winter than any time of year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and it doesn't, and that goes with a lot of disorders, but in general, and that can be anybody, but like just that lack of sunlight, that lack of being outside, that, the skies are a lot more cloudy. You don't get the sunny days. It affects your mindset.
We're just about out of time. And this always happens. We're talking and then we just look at the clock. But Alicia, I appreciate your honesty even today. And even when we went down the road of, the cutting road with our kids, it's stuff that we need to talk about. And I don't hear anybody else talking about it. So I'm glad that we did it today. Your website's fantastic. Go to themomkind.com. So many different resources. And you're available if somebody needs some help, if they need some counseling. Why don't you tell everybody about that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. The weeks before too, that the Facebook Messenger, that I was able to install on the website. It's been the best tool for people because you get on there, it pops up. And if you have a question, ask it. Sometimes it's a question about the article they're reading. Sometimes It's just like, oh, I got in contact with you. Do you have, what do you think of this? I had a lady reach out a couple of weeks ago, asked, she was looking through the Gifts for Autistic Teens article I had. And she's like, hey, I've got a cousin who's 24. She's autistic. I wonder if you can have help with ideas. I'm like, okay, what are her interests? And, because people don't always think about that. And it was like cats and drawing and stuff. I'm like, okay, well, these websites have, custom notebooks, sketchbooks you can get that have cats on it. We went through a couple of things. It was just needing somebody to help her come up with an idea that would be something that the person that she's given to be helpful. But that was a way to connect. And so people can reach out to me through that. I also do coaching sessions. There's kind of links everywhere on the website. If you're going from a desktop, it's in the top right corner. Otherwise, it's on every blog post. But and I do coaching sessions as well. And that's for whether you're a parent, you're an autistic adult, or just someone going through anxiety, depression, I'm there for you.
Yeah. And that's what we love about you is that even though you're in your wheelhouse, you specialize in some things, you're also a great mom with great advice and just things that sometimes as a parent, you don't think of. So definitely go there, themomkind.com. Alicia, as always, great talking to you. I really appreciate it.
You as well.
Yeah. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.